Welcome to the Pitch Movie Podcast. That's right, where we pitch ideas for remakes, spin-offs, and sequels, and even reboots of your favorite film franchise. Welcome to our first episode where we're going to tackle Superman. That's right, lots of news and rumors swirling about the impending remake of James Gunn's Superman, the launch of the new DCU. There's just never been a better time to reimagine the Man of Steel. So join me, Kevin Call, your host, and friends as we discuss the potential direction of the latest Superman story and pitch our own ideas and even fresh takes on the beloved superhero Superman. So who knows, maybe even our ideas will inspire the next big hit in the DC universe. Tune in now to find out.
Kal-El, you do not remember me. I am Jor-El. I'm your father. Even though you've been raised as a human being, you are not one of them. You have great powers, only some of which you have discovered.
You will give the people an ideal to strive towards. They will race behind you. They will stumble. They will fall.
Awesome. Well, welcome back to the Pitch Podcast. Joining me today is a great friend of mine, Adam Joyner. Adam, welcome to the Pitch Podcast. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's like old times. Anyone who can remember us from yesteryear, we used to do this quite often, quite frequently.
Yeah,
but
we were a lot more seasoned at it too. I think now we're just a bunch of old men. So
yeah, I was always old, but you've got you're starting to get the gray, and you got the freshman 15 that everyone just talks about.
Yeah, I'm starting to get my Clooney years with the salt and pepper look, So anyway, but you got a good Lex Luthor thing going on. You always have.
Yeah, so. I've always been the villain of this story. So.
Well, Adam, so we're talking about Superman in today's show, and we'll get into pitching our ideas for an upcoming movie and things like that. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the franchise. Talk about the character. Do you remember the first time you saw Superman?
I did. I will say that the first movie I ever saw, and I am old. We'll establish that. Was Star Wars. I saw that with my father at a drive-in movie theater. I remember seeing the X-wing fighters zoom across, and they were in front of the Death Star. I remember I was probably 6 or 7 years old. Don't have the exact math, but I was in there. And then the next movie I saw in the theaters, it was in Tupelo, Mississippi, at the drive-in movie theater. It was part of my Christmas. We had gone on, it was Christmas. I'm pretty sure it was Christmas Day because we opened up presents that morning with family. And I went with my aunt and my father and several of the family members there. We drove to the drive-in theater. It was freezing cold. And for you kids out there who don't know what the drive-in movie theater is, you used to drive out there basically to a field with a giant screen, and you put this big, huge metal box on the side of your window, or you'd have it come in through your radio. But I remember seeing this weird box they put on the side there, and it's just like, and it was on there. And the whole tagline of Superman was, what was it, Kevin?
Believe a man can fly.
And I'll never forget that he flew across the screen. And it was just like something I'd never seen before. You'd seen him on television sitting on a board with their arms out, but this guy just starts walking and flies straight up in the air. And to me, that Christopher Reeve will always be the most amazing experience. You got Marlon Brando, and I think we're having some sun issues here. I don't think you can see it now. When earlier my head was fully lit with sunlit across there. Those outfits where they were all bright white, and it was so clean when they were on Krypton. So Superman's always been, let's see, I've got a couple of props here, has always been my favorite. This is the original from the one of the first original animated on there. So that's my first experience. So I have a lot of love for the original series in there.
Yeah, me too. I mean, if you think about Superman, and I'm much younger than you, I'm only about to be 38. So the first time I saw Superman was not in a theatrical setting. It was many years later.
Have you ever seen it? Have you ever had the opportunity to see the big screen?
The original Superman, I've never seen it on a big screen. I've only seen it on VHS and obviously streaming and stuff like that now. But I remember
I don't think I hate to cut you off. I don't think that I've ever seen it else other than that one time. I've seen Indiana Jones and I've seen Star Wars. I think that's something they should do. They should re-release. Sorry, I hate to.
No, it is interesting that the original Supermans do not get like the theatrical re-releases like some of the bigger. I don't want to call them bigger, but other franchise properties like Star Wars and stuff. But yeah, I was in my house, and my dad had tons of video collections. He had Star Wars, he had Indiana Jones, and it was a typical Saturday, Sunday afternoon raining outside. And it's like, let's pick a movie. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And
the perfect age
I was
for
like,
Superman.
what is Superman? What is this? And he's like, oh, this is great. You're going to love it. So we put it in, and it was just like this whole idea of, like you just called out, like this idea that this man could fly. And like, the iconic scenes of, that I remember, because even at age 7, I was a romantic. I love the scenes where he was like flying around with Lois and just kind of going through Metropolis. Like, I'm just like, man, that would be so cool to just like, fly with a girl around town and stuff. But those are things that I just remember. I think the other one was just Kneel Before Zod. I think I actually saw Superman 2 before I saw Superman 1. Because I think that was the one that my dad really enjoyed watching. So that was sort of my experience watching Superman. But what was compelling about the character was just like he could do anything, right? Like you name the superpower he had. I mean, I don't think he could go invisible, but like, it's just like all the cool super.
He could go fast enough. He can go fast enough.
That is true. He was so fast you could see him, right? So, just there. We're going to talk about scenes later, but like the Niagara Falls scene where the kid jumps off and is playing and he falls off and Superman goes and gets him and stuff. Like just a lot of iconic things in those original.
When they were when they first come in to when they're flying, when he takes her flying, they meet on the rooftop and then she goes up there. The song that they play is "Can You Read My Mind?" It's by John Williams. There's actually the words and
one of the pinnacle soundtracks of all time, right?
Right. Well, when we got married, to surprise me, my wife and I, we walked in. We got married at a pretty prominent church here in town, and we walk in to the room as a married couple, and everyone's waiting on us right there. They're playing that song. She had someone that she knew that had played the piano. She contacted them. They learned the song, and they're playing it on the piano as we walked in to the reception after our wedding. I was just like, cool. Wow, that's pretty cool. It's the last cool thing she ever did. But no.
Yeah. Well,
she won't listen to this. But like so yeah, I'd say Superman's been pretty important to me too as well. So, I
mean, I'm going to go as far to say for me, Superman was really my first experience with superheroes. I didn't know my dad was not a comic book guy, right? Like he didn't have comic books at home. It wasn't something he grew up reading and stuff. But like, so I didn't know Captain America. I didn't know Spider-Man. I didn't know any of these comic book characters, superheroes that kids maybe grew up with because they had uncles or dads or whomever in their family that got them into that kind of stuff. It was really, truly Superman. And then I would say what was coming up when I was a kid was actually Batman. Like you couldn't go anywhere in the mid 80s, late 80s and not see the bat symbol everywhere. Like when that movie came out, we'll probably do a Batman podcast down the road, but like the way that they marketed movies back then, to me is so much better than the way they do them now because it was such an event, right? Like Superman was the same thing. I mean, I wasn't around during this time, but I
don't remember that, but I definitely remember Batman as being like they did not mess around with that. Like
T-shirts, lunchboxes. I mean, it was everywhere. You talk about indoctrinating
a billboard. Yeah. I mean, when's the last time you just saw a billboard that just had that black and kind of the gold original Batman? It was just on a billboard. Everybody has to remember this is the before time, before the internet. Internet didn't really start rolling around to the 90s. And I think that came out in 89. probably
Yeah,
87.
that's right. The
Yeah.
1989 was the first Batman. So that was when I was really starting to get into, comic books and stuff. So naturally, Superman kind of came up around that time for me when I first saw it at home. And so, but yeah, I would say Superman was my first foray into superheroes. And I feel like for a lot of us, and even the whole superhero genre in itself, Superman really he is the godfather. He is the one.
He's your first love. He's your first love. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, if you start naming superheroes and you're of a certain age, I think probably even younger, that's who you're going to go to. You're going to get a bunch of kids now. It's like, oh, Deadpool, or that kind of, or Wolverine, or maybe some of the X-Men. But I think if you're, over 25, that's one of the ones you're going to name first, Superman, and then you kind of back down because he's the most powerful. He's the most powerful when you start backing back down to Batman and Flash and Wonder Woman, those kind of in there on the DC side for sure.
Yeah, for those who don't know, a little trivia. So Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They were Jewish immigrants. I actually didn't know this. And they had a lot of feelings about being outsiders in a predominantly Protestant society where they were living in. And they kind of saw the idea of Clark Kent and Superman as this immigrant who's passing as a mild-mannered intellectual, but has the strength of steel underneath. And so I just thought that was really interesting in terms of, the background of what led to the creation of Superman and how it was this, really interesting, sort of Jewish hero type story, which if you read the Old Testament, very Moses.
They're going to be destroyed. They put the baby into the
capsule.
The capsule that is drawn by another family, raised by those.
The Old Testament talks about this, the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, and what that entails, and maybe Superman is that. So, and we'll get into some of the themes, but there's a lot of themes there that have come out in some of the movies and stuff like that. But let's dive into some other topics. Adam, we talked about kind of the first time we saw Superman. Let me ask you this one question. This is somewhat compelling to me to find out. What is something you don't like about Superman? Like, if I can find things about other characters that I don't like. What don't you like about Superman?
So when you say Superman, you're just talking about like the amalgamation of the character in general as I see him, right? You're not talking about like somebody's specific one, right?
Yeah, not Brandon Routh's Superman over Henry Cavill's or Christopher Reeve's, but just the character of Superman in general. Yeah.
So in the 1950s, 60s Superman, he was so powerful, like that he would sneeze, or he could blow out a sun, right? Mm-hmm. So he was so powerful. Everything had to be, if any conflict was going to get him, it was always going to be emotional, or how he deals with that sort of stuff. So I don't know that we ever saw or have seen a hyper powered Superman in live action. We've seen, I don't think that we can, with us talking about a movie, I don't know that we can, you have to kind of separate animated from live action. From what we've seen.
Hyper powered, like he just punches his way through the problem.
Right. Like he's so powerful that he needs to think of other things, so he's so strong. I mean, like we've never seen him, like even when, like, we'll do Henry Cavill when he's up on the platform and it falls. He's struggling to hold it. He's still not he's not the strongest person in the world. Now, the Snyder one, when he fought Steppenwolf, obviously he was super powered. He was powered, but he's not as strong as he has been. I don't think we've ever seen on screen the comic version of how strong Superman is. And of course, you're as strong as you need to be written, right? From the writer. So I don't know. I hate that we've not seen that. Now, I think there was the time when he fought in the animated series. He fought. I can't remember what his name is. I want to call him Doom, but he's not Doom. He's the shoots the Omega race. Help me out. I'm
Darkseid.
Darkseid.
Yeah.
He fights Darkseid. He's like, I never have to hold back. I mean, now I don't have to hold back. He still has to hold back because he's on Earth. If he punches a guy so hard, he goes through the planet. and destroys Earth, and he's still holding back. But he is that strong. He could literally bore through the planet and explode a planet if he wanted to. And we've not seen it. Even when he fought Doomsday. Doomsday was the other one I was trying to think of. You never. To me, even Doomsday was a ridiculous story. Like, and I understood what was behind it, the backstory of it, but there's nobody who can physically beat him. So that kind of makes you force you onto his relationship with Lois and his relationship with people, and being afraid of walking on eggshells all the time. I mean, you imagine imagine he's sleeping with Lois, not like the act of it. They're just in the bed together, and he rolls over in his sleep. He has to be conscious not to move so fast while he's sleeping that he doesn't split her in half just by rolling over. But you never really hear any of that part of it. And to me, that's more of an interesting thing with him than, he gets in a fist fight with Brainiac or, the Parasite. Because, I mean, he's eventually going to be able to punch his way out somehow. And he's smart. He's smarter. He's in the top intellect of any of any in the universe. I mean, he's as smart as Batman and Lex Luthor because he has an alien brain. But you just don't see that part of it. So I think we're missing out, and that's something that could be almost he is a god, right, among mortals, and you don't see him doing those things. So I mean, I think that's I think we have. I hate that we've not ever seen a super powered Superman. We've seen a super-ish man, but not a Superman, like who can. I mean, you can fly into space and hold your breath that long. I mean, all that stuff, and then you're going to be down here, and he's struggling to stop a car or catch a car fast enough to stop a bank robber. It would almost be old hat with him, and he literally could fly around all day and save everybody because he's fast enough and save virtually everybody. He chooses not to do it, which there might be a story in there as well. He chooses who lives and dies just because he doesn't get physically tired. He just kind of gets bored with it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing about Superman, you're hitting on 100% the thing that I hate, and it's the fact that he's Superman. I mean, because I think there's the trick that every writer out there wants to write so much humanity into him and have that story where he does fail, where he does have foibles and flaws and things like that, kryptonite, but they forget that he is Superman and that he can do anything that you could think possible. He could do it. And I struggle with that too, because if I was a writer, I would not want to touch Superman with a 10-foot pole. Like if I'm in Hollywood and they're giving me any project, whatever, I'd want any superhero other than Superman, because it's such a dichotomy and such a balance that you have to write that you couldn't make it work on screen. You hit the nail on the head earlier. It's like you tell the version of Superman that you want to tell for the story that you want to tell. And it seems like a lot of the ones that we see are more focused on, some kind of personal human thing that he's going through versus getting to see that fully fleshed out Superman. And honestly, I get stuck on this with Batman too. I mean, you and I've had side conversations about how the whole detective idea of Bruce Wayne
never been done. Don't get me started. And matter of fact, I have a thing on here. I wrote tangent time, which is something if we have a lull that we're going to talk about something and spoiler, it's Batman. But that we've never had a live action except for one, and this is what people are going to remember from this podcast is we've never had the great detective in live action except with Adam West. He's the only one who has the brain. I mean, it's a campy show. I get it, but we've got when in the latest, and this gets me aggravated in the latest Superman Returns.
I feel like I set Adam off here, folks.
In the Superman Returns, not Superman Returns, in the second Batman movie, I guess Batman versus Superman, Batman discovers all the other, he finds on Lex, he finds out about Aquaman. He finds out from Lex Luthor. He would have already known all that. That's what
Mhm.
that aggravated me. He's not the great detective ever. Christian Bale. Oh, where are you? Nothing.
Always a step behind everybody. I mean, the Joker had
Yeah,
everybody outsmarted.
yeah. The
Yeah.
Joker's smarter,
Mhm.
and Batman is probably the number 3 intellect in the world. And
Well, the
but
good news
Superman.
is the good news is we're not here to talk about Batman, but if we have some time, we'll jump into that.
But
But yeah, so we mentioned earlier, this is the best time in the world to be talking about Superman, and there's been a plethora of news over the Halloween and holiday break of last year surrounding Superman. So to catch a lot of people up, maybe if you haven't been following, the latest news surrounding Man of Steel is that James Gunn, the newly appointed co-CEO of DC Studios, has announced that he's going to be writing the next Superman movie. So first and foremost, I'm going to stop right there. When has the CEO of a studio written a movie? I just think that that's really fascinating to me, and we'll dive into that in a little bit. But I just wanted to point that out, that like Kevin Feige, the godfather of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like he's not over there writing like comic book movies. So maybe he's probably like giving notes and stuff like any executive producer would do and any CEO, but he's not physically sitting at a computer like writing screenplays. And maybe Gunn, that's just his bread and butter.
I think what they did was they offered Gunn the job of helming it like Feige, and he goes, "I want a better title. I want to be.
That's
I want to
true.
be. I want to be co-CEO.
I'm sure it comes down to that, yeah, because he's got Peter Safran as the co-CEO, who's kind of doing more of the business stuff.
I was like, "There's no way I can't see James Gunn in a business meeting talking about EBITDA and ROI on on the plushie on the on stuff like this. It's like, are we gonna have a meeting on this, or what's the return on this right here? But yeah, I don't see that happening. So
well, according to insiders, Gunn has been working on the project for some time, and the script that he's focusing on is going to be around the early days of Superman's career as a cub reporter in the city of Metropolis.
Oh man, we've not seen any of that. Wow,
we've never seen that.
That's a brand new, fresh take on Superman. Literally every single movie has been that way.
One of the more fascinating things about this whole story, though, is that at least the last update in Variety is that this new project from James Gunn hasn't replaced what was previously announced as a J.J. Abrams, Ta-Nehisi Coates Superman concept, which is also still in active development. And that project is rumored. I'm going to emphasize rumored because we're not a news outlet. We don't report news. We just, talk about what's already out there.
Fake news.
Is rumored to be focused on the Earth 2 comics version of Superman, which is Val Zod. So you've got these two Superman projects that are in development at DC Studios. And it's just interesting. This is a franchise that has a long and storied history. You have the most recent versions that, of my lifetime, Superman Returns and Man of Steel. Just some quick trivia for our audience. Those did not live up to the quote Superman expectations. I'm going to throw some numbers. Aquaman had $1.15 billion. Joker, $1.7 billion. In fact, compared to Marvel's MCU, which those movies have generated a total of $7.1 billion worldwide, each one of those movies averages around $716 million. Those movies, Superman Returns and Man of Steel, did not even hit that average of $716 million. So why is it a character that we just talked about in the open that has this legacy, that has this this sort of iconic, this is my first foray into superheroes, this is what I grew up with, this is what I know, it has the history, all of this life, can't do well when it comes to the financial side of a movie in today's world? And I find that very fascinating. And what's your take on that?
I have a pretty good idea. This is what I made fun of when you started talking about it. They've not told any new stories at all. I mean, we got him crashing, the Kents taking him in, him struggling as a child to understand who he is, accepting who he is, and then going into the city, becoming a young reporter, and then becoming there. We've not seen nothing that we've seen, and this kind of gets into what I have two partial pitches to talk about later, but I'm kind of done with it. I don't need to see Peter Parker get bit by the spider, and they didn't do that. Right?
Yeah.
They did not do that because everyone knows this story already. You can't do anything new with this story, right? So why go see a movie about a guy who's that you know everything there is to know about him, and they're not going to tell you anything new, right? Now, I don't necessarily, I don't really have any real interest in the Earth 2 Superman at all. I don't like J.J. Abrams. I just like to get that on camera. I did not like anything he's ever done. I like the first season of Lost, and it's debatable how much he was actually involved with that. But I don't like what he did with Star Trek. I don't like what he did with Star Wars. I don't like. I don't like anything about him, and I think James Gunn is going to be the new J.J. Abrams with the DC franchise. I think that if they don't
for
like
all you J.J. Abrams fans out there, we'll be happy to put Adam's email address in the in the podcast channel that you can email him death threats, and
you can just leave the comments below if this is on YouTube. So, but I think James. I like James Gunn. I like what he's done. I've liked a lot of what he's done. I like the Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought Guardians of the Galaxy was going to be the biggest failure in history. I was so wrong about it. We talked about this in the past. What the Guardians of the Galaxy is what the Green Lantern movie should have been. He should be in charge of Green Lantern, making space cops in space. That's what they are. Basically Guardians of the Galaxy. If he'd have made Guardians of the Green Lantern movie with in that same mold, I think it would have made a truckload of money. But these guys who take a classic superhero and then they're going to do these weird things with him. I mean, what is he going to do? He's going to be a kid again. We're going to see him land. We're going to see him rocking and crying in the bathroom because he has X-ray vision and he doesn't understand.
I don't want to see the whole I'm trying to earn Lois's affection story. Like, if that's going to be a huge part of what drive the character, like,
she's going to be super arrogant, and he's going to be, and this woman who is a New Yorker or whatever you think the city is, big city girl, and this hayseed who is going to come up and be clumsy and bumbling, and she's going to somehow fall in love with him. This is like, it's hard. I find it easier to believe that this guy came from a different planet and can fly than she falling in love with him by him wearing her down by being a bumbling idiot. And then he's been lying to her the whole time. And he goes, "No, I'm the guy that you're really crushing on. Both the things. I'm both the things you like."
What makes me nervous about a James Gunn Superman movie is you think about the movies that James Gunn has done, right? So you think about the Scooby-Doo movies, you think about his independent film Super, you think about Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, the Peacemaker series on HBO Max. You think about the latest Suicide Squad film. The commonality around all of those movies is you have offbeat characters. You have the ability to throw in crazy cool soundtracks. The stakes aren't high in terms of expectations. Like, nobody expected a tree and a talking raccoon to make it on screen in a cosmic setting, and it worked. Right.
And there's an irreverence in there that is good.
Tons of irreverence.
That is good for what he's got. Nobody had an opinion about the Guardians of the Galaxy because the number of people who knew, it's the same number of people who want the Rom the Space Knight movie, which I want a Rom the Space Knight movie, which they can't do because it's all tied. And you probably don't even know who Rom is. They're all tied up with copyright issues like that. Nobody knew, so you could do anything you want to do with it. But if you have an established character that you're going to sit there and you're going to try to destroy or break down and bring something fresh and new, you're just not going to be able to. I think you need to focus later on if you're going to try to do something.
Well, and here's the other thing. James Gunn came into the MCU when it had already been established, right? Guardians, I think the first Guardians movie was like the 7th or 8th movie, maybe the 10th.
Yeah, deep into it.
Deep in there. So you already had this sort of build up to that, and it was a way to expand the MCU into the cosmic realm and things like that, so that they could get to the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame storylines. And so now Gunn, he's now the CEO of
Well,
He's trying to build a universe, and you want to build a universe around Superman, right?
You said something there. Let's talk. Let's take a little break here. Marvel was trucking along, right? And then they had to kind of horseshoe in the the Guardian of the Galaxy movies, right? They kind of had to go in there. Do you remember the interactions between those characters and the earthly characters? They were always, excuse me, very awkward, but not like it was written awkward. It just felt awkward, like it was not like it didn't go. Like, the time passed and they're all kind of standing around, and rockets, they remember, and they're rockets in space or someplace, and then they're talking to Carol Danvers and they're talking to Wakanda. All that stuff did not feel natural and did not feel normal. It felt very odd, and you could say that's how it was shot, or what. No, it just didn't feel good. So trying to shoehorn those in together, I think that you could probably trace that's when the decline of Marvel started happening to me. Like,
that's another podcast, but we can talk about that. I think phase 4 and 5 and everything that's coming up has been very interesting time for Marvel.
But it was bringing James Gunn's influence into it that didn't work, and then now he's going to be in charge. It's the exact same thing. He's taken over, but he's taken over one of the root balls of Disney, and a flourishing thing, and he's just going to. Sounds like he's going to whack it down and start his own thing. So, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, I mean, on that. To give James Gunn credit, he did. They allowed him to be James Gunn, right? And Guardians was a huge success financially, critically. Audiences loved it. People like my dad, who knew nothing about Guardians, was like, it's one of his favorites. It had everything for everyone, right? It had humor.
My girls like it too.
Yeah, it had humor. It had that 70s sort of Star Wars, space movie vibe. It had all of those things you love, and it was a blockbuster film. And that's, why we go to movies. I heard on a podcast recently, I actually think it was our friend Justin Vactor's podcast, where one of his guests was I don't remember which one, but it was, they were talking about how, I don't go to movies sometimes to get Shakespeare. I just want to be entertained for 2 hours. And that's the thing about those MCU movies is, say what you want about them. They're not always perfect, but they are exactly what you need. 2.5 hours of solid gold entertainment, and you have a lot of fun with them, and they deliver. Except for
Endgame. Everybody walked out of Endgame going, what just happened?
I remember walking out of Endgame thinking, what the heck are they going to do next? Like, how do you come off of this? And I think they were trying to answer that question. Yeah.
My daughters were like, that was it? I was like, yeah, they're done. That's the end of the movie. And they're like, what are we doing? And I felt like that when Spock died, spoiler, in Wrath of Khan. It's like, the franchise is over, but
it's done. Spock's gone. What are we going to do? Yeah. One of the things to wrap up the talk about James Gunn, though, that he allowed to happen was Taika Waititi to happen, because you think about, without Guardians, you don't have Taika's approach to Thor and Ragnarok, which was hugely successful. However, you go and watch Love and Thunder, and it was terrible. And it's like trying to recreate the same kind of lightning in a bottle, and it just did not. It fell flat. So.
Trying to be kooky for kooky's sake, and then you get crazier. And don't think those two guys aren't buddies, and he's not going to be doing like the Aquaman movie or they're going to give him something.
Yeah, I'm assuming Waititi's probably on the list of future director of one of these DC properties. And we all know Taika was actually in Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds, so he has history with the characters and the franchises and stuff. Hey, give Taika Green Lantern. Maybe that's the right one. That would be interesting.
I can see Green Lantern, but poor Flash. That is a movie that has been dying to be made. That could be 10 podcasts on there as well. But
that said, though, not to get completely off topic as it relates to the DCU, but like all the stuff that went on with Snyder, Joss Whedon. The hiring and firing of tons of DC executives over the years, Jeff Johns, all that. And we're not going to get into all that news. If everybody has Google, you can go and Google all that and Wikipedia, all that, and get caught up. But it was very clear that somebody at Warner Brothers decided, hey, we need to forge a new path. And this is the guy that has the ability to do that. This is a guy that wants to do it. And so good luck to James and everything he's got in store. It's going to be really interesting to follow the news cycle as this evolves here in the first quarter of 2023. But he's made it very clear Superman is going to be an integral part of the DCU, and their plans for over the next 3 years. So,
he's the new Captain America. He's the new
Huh?
Captain America. He's the new Captain America for the Avengers. So.
Yeah, I'm not ready to get back into the pitch segment yet. We're getting there, people. We know this is why you tuned in, and we're 30 minutes into this thing, and we haven't gotten into the meat. But we really just wanted to set this up for you guys. So as we're dissecting the Superman franchise and stuff, Adam, I'm curious. Out of all the movies, there's been 13 films since 1948 that have been done around Superman. That's not counting the TV shows, Smallville, Lois and Superman. That's not counting any of the animated stuff, just talking theatrical films. For you, which one is the most rewatchable for you?
That's a good question. I would say that, it's obviously the first one. If the first one is on, and when I say the first one, the Christopher Reeves, the Donner film, and those movies, they shot the first and second movie all at one time. A lot of people don't know that. I think it had 2 directors, or 5 directors.
Richard Donner actually got credit on Superman 2 because Donner I think
just quit.
walked out or quit.
But they basically shot those movies one after the other. The Salkins did it, and so it's really one 4-5 hour movie if you want to get at it. So if that movie's on and it's playing, I stop and watch it every single time. There's no.
Do you have do you have a favorite scene or maybe a couple of favorite scenes that you like from those?
Well, when he's sitting there and the helicopter falls off and he flies up to catch that right there. I remember that. I remember that scene from being a kid. And he's like, he goes, "I've got you. You got me. Who's got you?" And he flies up, and then when he lays down on the tracks, which is the most ridiculous scene ever, when after the earthquake and he lays down, he puts his hand down and the train goes over the top of him. It's just those are literally scenes that I remember when I was a kid.
I have 3 from the Sal Khan Superman films. So the first one for me, I highlighted it earlier, was the Niagara Falls scene. I just love that scene. Like the stupid kid, he's
sitting there shitting there.
First off, where are his parents? Like, what are you?
Hey, that's what it was like when I was growing up. You that's how they were thinning the herd. There was no news report if that kid fell down and died. The parents were just like, the people walked over and they were like, you know what? Do better with your next kid. They probably didn't even serve time if that kid had died. But that's the 70s for you.
Well, he's just playing around the water, going on the other side of the post and stuff like that. Just wild, and obviously falls off, and then Clark has to turn into Superman and go get him and saves the kid and all that. My absolute favorite scene from this era of Superman on screen is when he finds the Fortress of Solitude. And I really want to encourage people, go get HBO Max for a month, stream this.
You mean creates when he throws it?
Yeah, well, creates it. He's got the crystal,
which looks like green kryptonite, which they never really talk about, but it's basically. That is true.
But the scale of that, right? Like, you think about the scale that was shot in 1978, right? Just the Arctic scale of all that. Just how, and just the effects to show the creation of the Fortress of Solitude. You have Marlon Brando's big floating head. Just all of that was just, what an amazing thing in that period of time of movies. Not to get off on a cinematic movie making tangent, but like Star Wars, Superman, Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, Terminator 2,
Indiana
Jones. These all movies, are kind of part of this like succession of each other, just film nerds just pushing the envelope on what they could do. And here we are. So yeah, I feel like that's just one of those really iconic cinematic moments. And then I think the third one is, me, man, I'm a character guy. That scene where Lois is interviewing Superman. I just love that scene. She's, first off, she's smoking a cigarette, which you don't see a lot in movies anymore, if at all. So yeah, just a great stuff from the original Superman films. The most rewatchable for me.
Wait. What color? When he goes, she said, "What color is my underwear?" Do you remember what color he says?
I don't remember now. What does he
He goes,
say?
pink. He goes, pink.
That's funny.
She goes over. So, yeah, I remember. I think when I was older watching, I was like, oh yeah.
Hey, and that was when Margot Kidder, like she was a fox back then. I mean, she was up there.
She did not age well, but she definitely was back then. She was.
Yeah. We're not going to start rating women on this podcast. It's not what our job is, and nor should we. But that said, I think my most rewatchable of the franchise is definitely that same era. I do like Superman Returns. I'm one of those people that falls into that camp.
Well, I mean, it's basically he shot it like Donner. It was a love letter.
It's supposed
to Donner,
to ignore the third and fourth of those of that series and pick up after the events of Superman 2. So yeah, it's I thought Brandon Routh did an honorable job trying to impersonate Christopher Reeve.
He looked like Christopher Reeve in Superman. I mean, he had the look 100%. Had the curly hair.
Had the voice. He had the look. I think the downfall of that movie was Kate Bosworth's Lois and
rating
I think
women again.
Bryan Singer, who is also Jewish, understood the Jewish sort of immigrant themes that the original creators were trying to do, and that movie very much was Clark feeling like an outsider in a human world and stuff like that. But
I would say that the plane scene is probably if that is on. If I was gonna watch it, when he's sitting there and he goes to stop it and the plane starts to buckle because of just some physics in there, and he sets it down, and when he comes on the plane, he starts talking, and he's like, statistically flying is the safest one, and then the girl from Virgin's over there going, yeah, the marketing person, you're a marketing person. I was like, that's 100% a marketing thing. Yeah, see, it's still safe for us to fly. I did not think Lois fainting was in character. Once again, I think Bosworth was terrible.
Yeah, she was the worst part about that movie. Yeah. The fact that Superman had a son. Spoiler alert! If you haven't seen it, that was.
And I didn't have a problem with him having a son. I really didn't. I just
didn't like how they handled it.
I thought it was
kind of silly.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, as soon as he gets his power, he commits murder. So
Singer, again, like going back to where we were at the beginning of the show, he made a conscious decision to really focus more on the humanity side of Clark Kent and Superman and his relationships. He did not want to go to the punch your way through something, and that's why the action in that movie was limited. And honestly, that's what Snyder was really Singer, Bryan Singer was critically panned for. But if you go look at Rotten Tomatoes, actually, that movie has more critical acclaim than the most recent Man of Steel. However, the audience score is lower on
if you
Superman
ask somebody
than Man of Steel.
If you ask somebody what their favorite scene is, the bullet to the eye, I remember that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that whole robbery scene is so great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So,
but I also think the Lex Luthor land owning scheme, just wanting to have an island.
The exact same thing again.
Yeah. It was like, do something a little different. And honestly, I think that's one of my most critical areas of the original Superman movies is they kind of approached Lex Luthor as this criminal, he's a criminal mastermind. He's smarter than everybody, but he's not rich. He's not a billionaire. He's kind of, flying by on his charm. He's a typical, goofy criminal.
I would definitely say in the first film that the Lex Luthor was not up to par with what.
I don't think any of the Lex Luthor. I didn't even like Jesse, whatever his name is from
he's by far the worst. By far the worst.
What's his name? Jesse Eisenberg or something like that.
He was working. Yeah. He who shall not be named in Superman Returns. I think he did a good job of being Lex Luthor. He's basically in exile, so you can't talk about him. But
I honestly still think the best Lex Luthor, and I promised I wasn't going to go into TV, Michael Rosenbaum. 100%. I thought he was really good. Much later in the series, early on, he was finding his way. Interesting fun fact, real quick about Rosenbaum. He's a James Gunn guy. Him and James Gunn are really good friends. He's played a couple of characters in Guardians of the Galaxy. I've seen chatter online of people who are campaigning to have Gunn write him as Lex Luthor in the upcoming Superman. I don't think that's going to happen. But
how creepy was it? This 27-year-old kid was hanging out with these 16-year-old and 15-year-olds from in Smallville, talking about how they're going to have a friendship that's going to be of legend. It's
very weird. That whole there's a lot of issues you could take with Smallville, but it was the 2000s. Everything was weird. They had a 35-year-old playing an 18-year-old. That was kind of what they were doing in TV back then. So, as long as he looked like an Abercrombie model, I guess it made it okay. So, we're not going to go into Smallville, but
I'll say this on Smallville: probably the best Clark.
100%.
That was ever done. He totally encapsulated Clark as a quote unquote teenager.
Any call outs from the Zack Snyder era of Superman? Anything that you liked or maybe disliked? Or
I liked Henry Cavill. I think he looked at the part. He was very fit, but he was never strong. He was never that strong. I think, and like I said, we should probably put there's heavy spoilers on this. I think when he let his dad die,
I didn't like that at all. Not a fan.
I didn't either, but I got it. But there was a lot of heart in there in that, and
why are these storytellers wanting to kill off Jonathan Kent? Because in the comic books, he's still alive.
He's died off a couple times on some different storylines, but no, I get it. Yeah. And I mean, I guess this is what makes him leave the farm and go out. I mean, sure, when his mom needs the most help, he goes and leaves, but I mean, he could literally fly home every night and do whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think that scene where his dad just looks back and says, "No, I'm going to die for this," and do it, and because he didn't want to give his son away. I think that's probably the most memorable of the scenes in there, and any of the stuff like when he was, they kind of did a remake.
What's the theme there? Was it his dad trying to explain you can't save everybody and I'm teaching you this and sacrificing myself, or is this more
protect yourself?
I'm just protecting you and
I don't want you to have to everyone to know who you are. Keep your secret a secret. That it's got to be that, because I don't. I mean, he knows his son could have saved him. He may not have known. There might have been. I mean, he knew his son was special, but he probably didn't know that his son could withstand a tornado and fly away from it. He probably is not. We don't know. We didn't see everything, so there's a good possibility that he thought he might actually get hurt. But I think it was more about, son, this is, if you do this, everybody's going to know who you are. You're not going to have a life. And he loved his son. That's one of the big things is that he loved him. It was very much self-sacrifice. So,
my favorite scene in the Snyderverse was Martha. No, I'm kidding. It's not Martha. I thought fighting Batman was cool. Not sure it deserved a 2-hour and 75-minute movie or whatever, how long it was.
I love Batman, and I think he could probably do it, but I don't think that was the way he would have done it, because Superman could literally be in orbit and laser eyes him into nothing instantly. So the fact that they had to get into a fist fight, I thought it was cool when the kryptonite started getting him and he was like, boom, boom, but I just, it was so unrealistic. It was
all right. So cool. The killing of Zod, are you on the, I liked it or I hated it?
I hated it. It was the worst part of the movie. Why it's, people die by accident and by, other things, but for him to sit there, I mean, you have the Phantom Zone, you have the ability to do that, but to sit there and break his neck and do it was so out of character that it didn't make any sense. It was, and I'm not, I mean, everybody's like, put Snyder in charge, because one, I don't like how everything's so dark in all the movies. It's like trying to watch an early Transformer film when you can't tell anybody apart. But it's just not, I very much out of character, and it pretty much ruined the movie and the franchise for me when he killed him. because
Yeah.
it's never really he doesn't have any guilt on it later. You don't see him sad about it. He's just like, I killed him, and if he can kill Zod, why not just go through and kill every single person on the planet who's doing whatever, So.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to jump into our pitches. We appreciate you guys hanging on. We know this is an exciting topic, lots to talk about, lots to dive into, so we'll see you here in a second. And we're back. Adam, I think we've exhausted the conversation around the Superman franchise, nitpicks, things we love, things we hate, all those kind of things. So here we are. We're going to dive into the meat of the segment here. Now, for future podcasts, I want the audience to know that, a lot of the ways we're going to approach this for future episodes is it almost will be kind of like a contest. You have to come in prepared, remake, spinoff, and sequel, but and we'll choose which one we'll talk about and which one wins this sort of conversation. We want you guys to decide, but for today, since we already know that Superman is in remake mode, we're really going to focus today's pitches on how Adam or I would approach a remake. So spinoffs, sequels, all of those things are off the table, but they won't be for other future episodes of the Pitch Podcast. So just wanted to mention that. And I can go first, or you can go first, Adam. What do you want to do? Flip a coin, or
you can go first, because mine are pretty simple. I have two pretty basic ideas, and I'm sure you've got 27 paragraphs of what you want to do, and I'll spend most of my time destroy what you're saying. And then we can kind of talk about what you have will be mine will be more of my response of what it should be as opposed to what you're thinking. So I'll make it what you say better.
I'll kick it off then. So yes, we established earlier, Gunn seems to think that a young Clark Kent Superman starting out in Metropolis, encountering Lois Lane is the way to go. I disagree with that. So I'm going to approach this from, hey, James, if you're listening, this is what you should be doing. And I'm going to start with, I like the idea of an established Superman already connected with the Justice League. All of those things exist. We live in a world where we're not building up to superheroes existing. They exist. They're around. People, because that's really, from an audience perspective, the world we live in today. We are so, I would use the word desensitized, oversaturated as it relates to superhero content and things like that. So why not create a movie that sort of comments on that kind of thing? So it picks up Superman. He's in Metropolis. He's married to Lois Lane. He's doing his Clark Kent thing on the side with the Daily Planet. He's got a relationship with Bruce Wayne, all of that kind of stuff. And then from there, from a world building perspective, James Gunn, you could go and then tell off those individual stories about what Batman's doing in Gotham, what Green Lantern's doing up in space, what Martian Manhunter's doing, what Wonder Woman's doing, all that kind of stuff. But, the setting for me is I want an established Justice League in the world of DC. And so in my film, it sort of picks up right in that mode. And then I like the idea. There's a comic book by Tom King that came out in 2019. So I'm going to segue here for a second. I'm not being paid to market this or anything, but Tom King's Superman Up in the Sky is a 6-issue comic book miniseries that was published by DC Comics in 2019. It follows the story of Superman as he travels to different parts of the universe in search of a kidnapped young girl named Alice. And along the way, he encounters various alien civilizations and confronts a number of powerful adversaries, including the immortal supervillain Vandal Savage. He comes across Darkseid. He comes across a lot of these other aliens. And as he goes through his journey, he has to grapple with questions about his future and the nature of heroism and the value of life, ultimately learning some difficult truths about himself and the universe he inhabits. So I'm not suggesting that you adapt that thing from the ground up. That would be cool, and that seems very James Gunny. I could see him doing like a full-on cosmic Superman story. I would go see that, but I like the idea that Superman is conflicted enough to focus his entire effort of a story to save one person versus many people. It's an interesting theme to me. that they could explore. I like too the idea of trials. It's sort of if anybody's grew up studying Greek mythology and stuff, the trials of Hercules and stuff. That's very much what this comic book was sort of written around. But I like the idea of, look up in the sky and there's Superman, and that he is this revered, sort of character. That's what I would center my plot on. But I wouldn't have this cosmic thing. I think what I would do. Go ahead. This is a conversation, so
I got a lot to say, but I don't know that you can start fresh with the heroes already established.
Why?
I think you kind of see this is going to be. You remember the Eternals movie? Remember they kind of tried to do that. Of course, these were all a bunch of unknowns that nobody knew. Right, that all the names sounded familiar because they're people from history, basically. But you had a group of people, and then they had the Eternals, and then they were going to spin off, and everybody was going to have their individual movie afterwards, right? Where I think that won't work. Now you have a lot of history here. You can have a Aquaman show up, a Wonder Woman, and a Flash, and a Batman show up and maybe there's a more of a history. I just don't see that working now.
Well,
from that point
I guess
of view.
my thing is I don't want to see another phase 1 MCU approach where it's like, okay, I'm going to build up to this team up movie. I didn't like that with the Snyderverse, where it was like, we got to find all the metahumans and unite the Seven and all that kind of stuff. We've seen all that. So like, why?
But you kind of got that with what you're saying. You kind of got that with that second movie. They didn't build them up a whole lot. I mean, Aquaman hadn't had his movie yet. Wonder Woman had hers. Superman had his, and Batman had his with Batman versus Superman, right? So they kind of did a hybrid there, and it didn't work. So to go and have a movie, let's say, and my idea with the movie was like I said, I have two, having an older Superman and kind of in the same thing, but him being older and then the younger people coming in and not be established, and they start having, I don't want to get into mine, but as you get old, that formula that you got there, they've tried it twice already. They tried it with Eternals, and they did and they did it with the Batman versus Superman to kind of kick start it, right? Some of them people had their movies, some of them didn't, and then you had one where nobody had their movies, but they were in the same universe kicking. I don't think it worked. I think that's why Eternals did so poorly. If they had done,
that's probably why Black Adam did really bad too. Again, it was kind of trying to shoehorn this origin character into an established,
right. And even trying to do a prequel, trying to get it in there, it didn't work. I just don't see how you can't start a brand. What I'm getting at is I don't think you can start a brand new franchise that way, where it's like you're starting in the middle of the story, right? Mm-hmm. If you come in and they're all sitting around the round table, and Aquaman's there and Wonder Woman, they're all talking. All right, no, we're adjourned and we got to go do this.
I mean, part of me thinks it worked for Spider-Man. It worked but again, Spider-Man had 12 to 14 MCU movies. I mean, that's the whole problem. If we were starting Superman in the middle of DCU, it makes sense. But it's
if you're starting,
you're right.
Starting fresh.
He is the Iron Man of DC. So like he's the first guy. You think you're alone, Superman. You're not. There's others out there. So Samuel L. Jackson will show up at the end probably, and all that. But yeah, I guess it makes sense. So I like your idea of an older Superman.
I do.
So in my story, I didn't get to finish pitching, but like one of the elements I had in my story was, again, I wasn't going to copy the Tom King Up in the Sky. I just like the idea of him chasing a girl, to save her. And it's sort of like the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many, sort of, theme. But it was also what I liked about that. My plot was I was going to introduce the Legion of what are they called? The Legion of Superheroes, whatever the
Legion of Doom, or the ones from the future?
The kids from the future that come back in time and stuff like that. And I like the
Legionnaires,
idea
the Legionnaires
of showing a young Superman what his future looks like and what he means to the world. And
They will
that could be a
100%
really
do that.
interesting element.
That is 100%
Yeah.
what's going to happen, by the way. That's what Gunn is going to do.
Yeah.
I promise you. There's going to be a young Superman, and somebody's going to come from the future to say, "You're our only hope, Obi-Wan," and that's what's going to happen, without a doubt.
It's definitely the Legion of Superheroes, and there's a great I mean, Jeff Johns did an interesting run, Superman Secret Origins, where there was some of that. So I could definitely see Gunn pulling from that. So I actually had a series of comics that I was sourcing from. So Up in the Sky, Michael J. Straczynski's new Superman that he did, that new Origins, the Secret Origins from Jeff Johns. I was sort of pulling from all of that to say, okay, if we do set this within Gunn's universe, because now I'm pivoting my story. Originally, I didn't want to do that, but now let's say we're going there. I think that's the best way to do it. So, yeah. So, all right, it's your turn. Let's hear it. So you said older Superman.
I would say that you have an older Superman, and he's been trucking along doing his thing. He's the superhero of the planet, right? And kind of like the reverse of what happens with Batman. Batman comes along and he creates all the villains because they up the game, because he does that. He starts kind of encouraging these other heroes. He becomes the mentor to the group. He's not going to get much with Batman, but he's going to know who Batman is, and they're going to figure each other out real quick. And I think that's how, if you want to introduce him that way, you have a movie where he's there. You spend the first little bit of the movie kind of saying, this is Superman, this is who he is. You release some prequel comics and whatnot. He's the superhero on the planet, but he's getting older, but he's going to live to be 10,000 years old, right? He's just got a lot of experience. Batman comes to him and goes, "I know who you are," or he lands on Superman comes and gets in contact with him, and they know who each other are very quickly. And then maybe Superman's flying around and he sees Wonder Woman on her island, or you go, some of the others, Martian Manhunter, he figures out who they are, and he starts bringing these guys together because he doesn't want to do it by himself. Because maybe he's married, he's got a family, and he wants to spend, they're living on the farm or whatnot. And, of course, he got Lois to fall in love with him. I think to me, that's more interesting, and you can slowly build up the story that way with one movie. I mean, you could have a movie where you just have Superman be Superman, right? Like he's got to stop a comet, he's got to stop something that's coming in. You come in,
definitely needs to be a lot of action, I think.
Right, you have him where he is you have a section of the movie where it's hard for you to catch your breath, and you could call this would be the name of mine, a day in the life of Superman. Right? He wakes up. He doesn't have to sleep, but he wakes up, and all day long he has to go to work. He has to spend time with his family. He has to do what he's got to do, and he's got to save the people that he can, the most judicious, all over the planet, all day long. That's what he's doing. He's got an 8:15 meeting with his boss where they have to pitch story ideas. There's a terrorist attack in Kurspakistan. There's a mudslide in Chile. The Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is about to fall over. He's got to go fix that.
And on top of that, he's got to run a race with Flash.
Flash isn't even. But see, that's the thing. He's doing all this work.
Yeah.
He's doing all this work, and he can't spend time with his family. And how relatable is that to what you've got going on right now with your life, right? We're not superheroes. And what he wants to do is pull in other people to help him take over, because he recognizes that there are other extraordinary people out there, and he starts recruiting. He's the Samuel L. Jackson. He creates the Justice League because he's smart enough to do that. He finds these people and he mentors them. He's got a kid that's sort of helping with Flash. Flash is, and not having be some weird emo kid, have him be Barry Allen, who is who has the worst job in forensics, being a cop, and he knows because he's Superman and can see that somebody's doing something, and he goes and he recruits him, and he helps him, helps him with his costume, helps him with this, or recruits Batman first because Batman has money.
It kind of sets him up as being really the Tony Stark of the DC.
And we know that works, right? And you do that, and you kind of create a he is the shepherd and does what needs to be done to help get people into there. And like I said, you could have a movie. The first half of the movie could be nothing but action. Think about a movie. I mean, it'd be very expensive, but like all he is doing is constantly he goes to sit down to eat dinner, and it's like, he looks up and Lois and his son Jonathan Jr. or Jonathan sitting there and goes, "What is it?" He's like, "Well, there's a plane about to crash." And what is she going to say? No, dinner's going to get cold. She's go, and then that's what happens. That's his life. That's what it would have to be. Or you have to decide.
So they do have some of this, right? That Lois and Superman series on the CW focuses on kind of an older Superman with a family. He's got 2 kids.
But he's not.
He's made a decision to sort of recluse himself into Smallville, and stuff. But there is those scenes where he has to jump away from dinner to go save a missile from striking a.
Right, and the problem is that you move to someplace like Smallville. The chaos of whatever follows you because you're Superman, right? It comes back to you. So I don't know. I think that's more of an interesting story. He's a mentor. He's growing. He gets the team together, and he builds the team, and he helps them. Everybody's I work alone. Batman, and have a younger Batman, or you could have an old Batman. You could have. There's no reason that you couldn't have. Batfleck in there, but maybe if you want to have, to be honest, I watched 10 minutes of the new Batman movie, and it was so boring I turned it off. I've not finished it. It was so boring. And you and I talked about doing a Batman movie a long time ago. We talked about having the Riddler be a serial killer. I think our idea was a trillion times better if you wanted to go dark and edgy. I was not happy with emo Batman. I'm sorry, not emo Batman, emo Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne should be a stud and a man of men because it's a mask. But anyway, I don't want to cut off.
That's probably our second podcast. But if we make it to that.
But like I said, if think about a movie where he is very wise and all-knowing and not unsure of himself, because all he does all day is save everybody, and he's like he just wants to lighten the load some. Even with a team of 5, somebody like Flash would be the most help for him. And then Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter. You could pull out the Elongated Man or Plastic. He just starts trying to build the team up just so he could spread the work, just so he could have some. I hate to say me time, but he wants to be with his son. He wants to be with his family, and then I think that gives you all the things you want: a ton of action. You have world building. You can start slowly adapting the characters to what you want to do, and then you have that heart of it. Is like the reason why do you want? He's sitting there with Jonathan. If Jonathan's going to be the name, he's like, Dad, I know what you do, and he doesn't keep it a secret from his son because you can't. It's hard to keep Christmas presents from our kids now, and they're, when they're little. You're going to keep the secret that you're Superman from your children, and they're going to be like, what? They have to know. You just have to, but he wants to spend time with his family. How much time can he spend with Lois if they go to sleep, and this is something that probably happened. He does not need to sleep. So when they go to sleep at night, all he would do is be saving people on that or writing stories. He'd have to get up, and then there's a lot of it where he can hear Lois's heartbeat constantly, so he knows what's going on. The second he hears her start to wake up, he zooms back home and gets back in bed. Hey, honey, I'm back here. That to me kind of gives you that super powered, how powerful of a superhero he really is. And then you start world building. That makes more sense to me than having another story where he's a kid, where he comes into his powers, and then he's got to be a cub reporter, and someone's going to be mean to him. He's got to hurt his feelings, and he's got to learn how to fit in. We're past all that. We've seen that 100 times, every single show. Let's see him, Superman, be the man. Let him be super. Let Superman be super. That's kind of, and then my other part with that would have been kind of get into my pitch and stepping on yours is I'd love to see Red Sun. We talked about it before. I didn't give you time to really research it, but if you have a chance, Red Sun has a motion comic where Superman crashes in the Urals in one of the Soviet republics, and they did it animated, which was terrible, but the motion comic was great. And basically he grows up and over there basically ends up taking over Russia. He's fighting Lex Luthor, who's the smartest man in the world. They fight constantly. And then at the end, I won't spoil it for you, but it's a great story, and I would love to see that in a. You could do it in 2 movies. You could do it in 1 probably. It'd be a very fast paced movie, but that's a very interesting story because he's just if you a lot of people have that itch where they got to have Superman be completely different, and he is different, but he's inside of him. He's kind of got the same thing because he's kind of raised by a kindly family and that kind of thing. But I think if you take Superman back to the original pit and you make him the man, you make him the mentor, and he starts growing this team of people around a team of extraordinary people around him, funded by Batman. You make something I never understood is why Superman didn't fly into space and find a big chunk of gold, flying around in space, or use his X-ray vision to find where oil is. And he's not so. If in some of the past movies he's killed somebody, if he knows where like buried treasure is or something like that, you help Batman
I think it's just that modest upbringing of Mom, Pa Kent, and
but what you do is you need
those type of things.
You need a space station. I'm talking as a mentor. You would think this. You would need a space station with technology. He has access to Kryptonian technology, so you fund it by whatever means you have to. I mean, he could build robots to do all that stuff because you never talk about who's in the original in the Justice League television show, which is great. You have people working in the cafeteria. Somebody's got to pay those guys, and food's got to get up there.
Adam, so you're in an elevator with James Gunn, and you've got 2 minutes as you're climbing up the floors of Warner Brothers building to pitch him your idea. What are you going to say?
So I loved you in. No, I'm just kidding. I think probably start kind of building what I said before. You have an older established Superman, maybe John Hamm. I think is the older. I think he looked pretty good in Top Gun recently. I think he has the jaw and the hair. Maybe have him hit the Tom Cruise gym a little bit and do that. Superman is getting tired basically of saving everybody by himself. He needs to start creating a team of people. He starts looking for extraordinary individuals. Kind of thought about maybe going the way of technology with robots. Maybe he's already using robots. Maybe that would be something that could be interesting in there. They already have some people flying around. That's kind of a thing in the comic where people look like Superman flying around, or not people, but robots. And he starts going out to try to recruit individuals who can help him. You got, he maybe he reaches out to Batman. Batman could be established. He could just never. They know who each other
Who's your
are.
Villain?
Earth.
I mean, there's got to be a villain, right?
Well, I mean, you have society. You have people be the villain. You have that there's such a need for help that, I mean, if you've got to have a villain, you go to Brainiac. No one's done Brainiac live action. Brainiac's going to come in to do this. You could do Lex Luthor, but I think Brainiac's probably the easiest of the ones that have not been used, that are always teased around. Not a lot of people know who Brainiac is. That could be a little bit of an issue. But not you say, I think Brainiac's probably the best choice for this, because maybe he knows he's coming, or something's happening, or maybe he accidentally creates Brainiac, or not creates it, but he helps reactivate him. But you have him go around, and you like you said, the first part of the movie is just wall-to-wall action with him trying to juggle life, family, and saving the planet. And then you get he starts to recruit the Flash, Batman, Wonder Woman. If you're gonna want to create that part of it, you do it. Or you have the whole movie of him just being super powered, hopping around, doing whatever he's got to do as fast as he can, trying to save as many people as possible. And just the job is too much. That part is getting to him, and that makes sense, right? He's so strong. He doesn't need to sleep, and he doesn't need rest. And I know this is way over 2 minutes, but I need a better job of 2 minutes. But superpowered Superman, trying to save everybody, goes out and recruits another class of superheroes to try to to help him. And he's a mentor. So I think that was a terrible job and much longer than 2 minutes. But I think my
elevator ride's over, man.
my sexy voice and me putting my hands on him and shaking him while I do it. I think that would probably get his attention. So
I'm
that's
gonna
me.
I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I know I kind of had two pitches as well. I had a more established Superman Metropolis with the Justice League already in effect. You guys kind of sold me out of that with the idea that that's kind of already been done with the Snyder movies and what they were trying to do with Batman versus Superman. So I totally agree. I'm going to try to put myself.
I think you said like Iron Man. You did say that, right? We had a little technical issue, but I think I want to make sure that you get credit for that. Superman would be basically the new Iron Man.
I think
Samuel Jackson type deal. He's the recruiter and the mentor.
I think he's kind of a combination of both, right? He is the mechanism of establishing this world where superheroes exist. He's the first Avenger, so to speak, like Captain America. He is the catalyst of the world reacting to superheroes, like Iron Man was, in terms of, wow, he's this guy. But he has this secret identity, and he's young. And I'm trying to put myself in the mind of James Gunn, how I would do this. He is young. He's in Metropolis. He is, sort of trying to understand this concept of his dual identity. And the reason I'm going to go this route, because I when I think of stories, I tend to think in terms of characters and themes before I start thinking about plot. And for me, I start with the themes, and I start thinking about who the movie going audiences are now. Like I'm a 38-year-old man. Nobody cares what I want to see in a movie. It's about what do the 11 to 20-year-olds want to see, because they are the biggest consumers of media. It used to be, what does a 13-year-old want to go to the theater and see? The problem is nobody goes to theaters anymore. It's what can I see on my phone or my iPad or whatever. And so it's all of those things. But when you start thinking about the Gen Z cohort, and what they care about the most is this idea of, every individual is unique. Every, there might be different preferences for that, but like this theme of otherness and being an outsider, that's a huge thing that these Gen Z audiences care about. And honestly, that's very relevant with Superman, because that's exactly what Superman feels like, is this outsider in a world of humans. And so I think you explore that in the concept of how he is trying to sort of, understand that Clark Kent versus Superman identity. I also want to see a movie, and I hinted at this earlier when we were talking about the original Superman films. I want to see a movie with Lex Luthor, maybe not as the villain to start, but like becoming that sort of Moriarty to Superman's Sherlock Holmes. I don't want to see a destitute Lex Luthor where he's trying to criminal his way into things, sleeping with old ladies and on their deathbed and stealing their dogs and just to get the yacht and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to see that Lex Luthor. I also don't want to see the maniacal child who has daddy issues. I don't want to see any of that. I want to see this successful businessman on the top of his game, this guy who's got everything going for him. He is essentially Bruce Wayne, honestly, probably more charismatic in a lot of ways, and who just doesn't like the idea of an alien being among us and almost being the hero, thinking he's the hero of the story. I want to see that. I want to see that playing out over a course of not just one film, but a lot of films. I think Gunn could actually do that. I think what James Gunn does really well is villains and just offbeat characters and stuff. And to me, Lex Luthor kind of falls into that camp. Superman's almost going to kind of be maybe more of a traditional type hero character that we see, just with those identity sort of themes that we're talking about. And then I hinted to it earlier. I love the idea of the Legion of Superheroes coming and showing this young Superman like what his future is as that old Superman when he's established, what the world thinks of him, what he means to the world and stuff like that. So that to me can then be that sort of mechanism of what motivates him to begin this world building that we're talking about as that sort of Tony Stark to say, okay, I can't do this alone. But I don't know who else is out there, or at least he won't know until the end of the meeting or the movie. And that's where we'll set things in motion. And that's sort of my take. I think the villain for the film has to be something related to his past as a Kryptonian. And I think Brainiac is probably the right choice. I feel like if anybody could make sense of a Brainiac on screen and in an interesting story, James Gunn could be that guy. To your point, he's a little challenging because he's essentially an AI. He's Skynet, Kryptonian Skynet kind of thing. So it'd be interesting to see the different ways you could creatively approach that. But
who would you have playing your Superman?
Oh man, I have wrestled with this, and honestly, I'm not hip on all the young, good-looking Superman-looking actors and stuff that are out there today.
If I was gonna, I'll give you. Did you see Top Gun?
I did. I think Glenn Powell would be a great Superman. Is that where you were going? Yeah, I mean, he was on my list for sure.
Yeah, I would say in your scenario, right?
Yeah.
Of what you're talking about doing, he might be 10 years or 10 years older possibly than what you're going for. But I think as a younger
we can
Superman,
digitally de-age Harrison Ford in the next Indiana Jones movie, then I think we could do that with Glenn Powell.
But I don't think he needs it. But I would say that he would be a good such. I don't like the fact what I don't like about your idea is that someone comes from the future and they're like, hey, you're going to be great, man. You just got to believe in yourself. You're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need it. I mean, he figures out pretty early on that he's the man, and that's I guess it kind of goes back. We've already seen this. He kind of gets this in all the movies.
Do you think I could be Superman? I feel like I have the Clark Kent look, right?
I mean, you're 5'2", so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
if
definitely
they
under 5'10".
They would have to digitally stretch you, and then you'd have to start doing some push-ups. So I
feel like you and I are a good casting. I mean, you're the bald Lex Luthor villain to my charming.
So this is the second time I've been called bald. Most of this is a choice. Most of it.
It's fair.
Like most of it. So.
Yeah. Hey, it's all good, man. We love you. No shame there.
So our ideas are basically an older Superman who goes out and is the only superhero or the only main superhero and collects basically a superhero cadre of individuals and you go from there. And then yours is he's kind of a punk kid. And some people from the future tell him he's great.
I didn't say punk kid. I just said he's already Superman. He's flying around Metropolis saving people. It's just the early days of it. The jury's still out on is he the savior? Is he a bad guy? Depending on who you ask, there's that sort of dichotomy. So there is that reaction to we're not alone in the universe sort of element from some of the previous movies that you could bring out again. But I don't want that to be the overarching theme. My overarching theme of the movie is this is a movie about identity. This is a movie about who am I, and what is the hero that I am supposed to be. Again, kind of pulling from Tom King's Up in the Sky. This story that I referenced earlier about the little girl who's kidnapped, what I love so much about it is the little girl never once doubts that Superman is going to save her. Never once doubts, 100%. At the end, he's like bringing her back to Earth, and he
asked her,
he asked her like, and she looks up and says, "I just look up in the sky, and you're Superman." So I love that idea of exploring that through secondary characters and other characters and stuff. What I don't like about a younger Clark Kent Superman in that world, I hope Gunn doesn't fall into this, is that love story with him and Lois. I've seen it too many times.
They're going to have. I mean,
it's going to have to happen,
right?
And so,
so like I would probably go see that movie, but I wouldn't see it opening weekend. So I'd wait to, if I was going to see, I'd have to wait and see. Only because how is that truly, and I'm not trying to be mean. And everybody knows if it's not my idea, it's not a good idea. But but is it really interesting? I mean, is it really something you want to see? I mean, like he's flying. You're basically doing like a young Batman, right? I mean, or whatever. He's trying to find his footing. He is Superman. He's flying around saving people. People are like, oh wow, whatever. And then he has to have somebody from the future come in and show him how you're going to be even greater someday. I don't know that.
This is why we said at the beginning of the podcast that Superman is not an easy character to write. I'm just being honest.
I agree.
I love to write things, and I love to write about characters. I would never want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Just wouldn't want to do it. It's too much.
I think it's definitely easy to do. I just think from what you're showing, it's going to be hard to do world building. I think because they're going to have to shoehorn in Lois and all of that, and he's going to be unsure of himself. Where my idea, it's all that's done already. The drama is what every person who's in a relationship already knows. It's hard, right? And it's going to be and it's going to be even harder because you're Superman, because his job is so important. The only other person on the planet who would understand his job is just as hard would be the president of the United States, right? It's the only other person who could even have a conversation with on some level and remotely connect to him, right? And even then, Superman's job is harder because he's literally saving everybody, and then you go to build the rest of the world out. So. Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, the thing with yours or with mine is you have so much action in the early. It would be hard to justify it. You have the arc of what he has to do all the time. You have the break of bringing people in and having them start helping, and then the movie maybe builds to Brainiac, and then Brainiac is the second movie. You see, maybe he's using Brainiac to help him try to fix all of the world problems, and then Brainiac gets out of control because Brainiac was a thing he created, but then the original Brainiac from Krypton connects through the internet, and then that he creates his own problem, which is what all superheroes do.
Superman: Age of Ultron.
Yes. Oh no, we're totally stealing from them, but they stole from Brainiac. That's what Brainiac was. You have the same thing.
I think it still falls in line with the idea that in the DCU, Superman is your Tony Stark.
Exactly. I mean, you don't have
bringing everybody together. Yeah, for sure. I think you can't get away with that. And how you get there and how you do it. In the Iron Man movie, Tony was this philanthropist, playboy jerk, and then he evolves into this hero, but he doesn't even think of himself as a hero. I still love that line from Jon Favreau, in Endgame, where he says, Tony couldn't even keep up with Tony. Maybe it was in one of the Spider-Man movies. I can't remember. It was a post-Endgame line from one of the MCU movies, and for me, there was a lot of growth that Tony went through as Iron Man over the course of the 3 movies and the interconnected films. To me, that could be how they would approach Superman and why Gunn thinks that a early days in Metropolis is a good idea is that you find him in this world where he's conflicted around all this optimism and hope that he provides people, but ultimately he gets to that point and he becomes that Superman that you want to see at him. It just may not be in that first movie. So it will be interesting. I don't think.
I got to thinking about the Brainiac. Now, like I said, let's say he's using robots to help, or using some technology to try to help him keep up with everything, and then Brainiac comes in and takes over that stuff. That's what he would probably, not that he creates Brainiac. I don't think because he doesn't have to, because the Kandor, he comes in and grabs the cities, and that's what he does, and takes all the technology and things along those lines.
So real quickly, because we're coming up on time here, who was your casting what if again? You talked about. I definitely picked Glenn Powell, but
I would say I picked Glenn. I gave you Glenn Powell.
You gave me Glenn Powell, but I like that. I think that's a good one.
I would say John Hamm for sure.
Yeah.
He's my age. It's interesting that we're picking if I could be in the movie, that was who I'd pick. But I think he's got the hair, he's got the jaw. He was fit in Top Gun. I think he'd be a good choice.
We chose 2 guys from Top Gun Maverick. What does that say about that movie? It's a great movie. Also about people who fly. Well, listen, everyone, thank you for joining us on the Pitch Podcast. we've really been super thrilled to talk deep into Superman, the legacy of the character, the history, how he has transformed the world of superheroes in cinema. And we hope you enjoyed these pitches. So what we're going to ask is once you guys get a chance to listen to the episode, please buy or sell. Let us know if you buy Adam's pitch versus mine, or if you choose to sell it. And one of our future episodes, we'll come back and see who got the vote as it related to the best pitch. But this has been the.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not say it. I didn't do a pitch for myself. I do have a YouTube channel. It's called it's I Nerd Ya. It's the letter I, nerd, and ya. So it's I Nerd Ya. If you're curious about what I'm having for lunch, or for lunch, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or what we're doing, we literally have one of the worst channels on the planet. So that's the best pitch I can give you. So it's all over the place and it's a hot mess. But if you're interested, it's I Nerd Ya. So
it's a great way to keep up with Adam outside the podcast, and you can follow me on Fused Film anywhere on Facebook, Instagram, and other social channels. So thank you, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of The Pitch.